First besieged, power, influence, corruption, and now the Liberal Party. The conduct of the party's highest office bearers, former President, Vice President, Treasurer, Chief Fundraiser, well-known Liberal lobbyists and officials is under scrutiny at ICAC. The lobbyists, with Arthur Sinodinos and Nick DiGirolamo, were on the payroll in pursuit of the biggest prize of all, the takeover of Sydney Water cash flow work in northwest Sydney, which, if approved, would have enriched AWH and its stakeholders, including the family of Eddie Obeid, beyond the wildest dreams of avarice. The power structures of the Liberal Party are under siege, with Liberal dissidents demanding federal intervention to break factional power. Through the current ICAC investigations, they claim it is the Liberal Party which is now being dragged into disrepute. Their leader, John Ruddick, tonight risks suspension or expulsion to go public.
Paul, are you looking forward to coming along today?
No comment.
Liberal Paul Nicolau's Solutions R Us consultancy was on board the AWH public-private partnership strategy to take over Sydney Water's infrastructure and cash flows from northwest Sydney. So too was Michael Photius, a former state minister and long-standing Liberal factional organiser. AWH CEO was Nick DiGirolamo, Liberal Party fundraiser with close connections to Barry O'Farrell, now the Premier of New South Wales. He was on a substantial salary and brokered a financial injection from Obeid Corporation.
I'll have more to say when we finish.
On Thursday, Senator Arthur Sinodinos, former Liberal Party President and Treasurer, faced 6 hours of questioning in which he often resorted to the "I can't recall" response. Significantly, his competence and diligence as a director and then chairman of Australian Water Holdings were questioned.
I'm not into speculation, I'm into the facts.
He knew nothing of a $164,000 payment for a corporate box at Sydney Stadium, nothing of $28,000 spent on limousines, nothing of $160,000 spent on lobbyist Paul Nicolau's Solutions R Us, nothing of $183,342 paid to a Central Coast Liberal Party related fund 8x4, and nothing of a $72,000 donation from AWH accounts directly to the Liberal Party. These payments were authorised during a cash flow crisis when AWH could not meet its tax and staff super obligations. The ICAC did not produce any evidence that Senator Sinodinos knew about a $3 million stake in AWH from Eddie Obeid Sr.'s Obeid Corporation, so it seems unlikely his conduct will be found to have been corrupt on this evidence. The ICAC has indicated the evidence will focus on his integrity in the next investigation.
Sorry guys, be careful.
There's major fallout from all this for the Liberal Party of Australia and its New South Wales branch.
Be careful, thank you.
John Ruddick, a Sydney mortgage broker and Liberal Party member for 21 years, stood against Arthur Sinodinos for the New South Wales branch presidency in 2011. Mr Ruddick faced suspension last year. John Ruddick, thanks very much for talking with us.
Thank you.
You were at the ICAC public gallery this week during Senator Sinodinos' evidence. What were your observations?
Well, I'm sure that the Liberal Party has many supporters in the public who are highly distressed by the events of the last few weeks. But for people within the party, and there's only 11,000 of us, we're very tired of the influence that a small group of people have within our party. Now, the party structure that we have was put together in 1902, so it's 112 years old, and it's a delegate-based system. It concentrates power in a very small group of people. And when I say a small group of people, I'm talking 3 or 4 people are the ones who effectively decide who our senators are going to be, who the members of the upper house are going to be, our party president, and increasingly even deciding who our members of the lower houses are going to be. Now, that concentration of power, it makes a small group of people and their close associates very attractive to the commercial world. It makes them attractive because of the influence they can have over government. Now, I'm not against lobbyists. It's in the public's interest to have a good ethical lobbying industry because business and government do need to talk to each other efficiently. Now, an ideal lobbyist would be somebody who has in-depth commercial experience and who also understands the bureaucracy and then knows their way around Parliament House, and they bring genuine commercial skills to this enterprise. But what we have, when we have people who have amassed through the delegate system a lot of political influence over who's going to be a member of Parliament, they aren't really bringing commercial skills, they're bringing political influence. And so now that can be very powerful because they can get their jobs done, but it's not in the interest of the power, it's in the party.
It can be conducive to corruption.
Well, look, within the party organisation, there's been for years increasingly dodgy rorts and dodgy ballots, and it's a small step to go from a culture of corruption within the party to then take it into the commercial world.
What's the gang, and how have lobbyists infiltrated, if you like, or dominated the state executive and the state council? Okay,
well, the gang is a term that we use to lump all the factions together because all of the organised factions within the party are now united. For decades they've been at war, but now they're all united.
It used to be left-right.
It used to be left-right, and now it's the gang versus what we call the Democratic Reform Movement, which is disorganised, which is really just the average everyday branch member who wants to have a say in the party. Now they know that they can have a say. So the gang is there's really three factions that are very much united, and they are united against democratising the Liberal Party. They're united in keeping the delegate system in control because that keeps their very few, 3 or 4 people really running the party, and that's what we're trying to break up.
We've seen today Michael Photius at the ICAC, a lobbyist. John, Tony Abbott, the Prime Minister, said earlier this year you could either be a power broker or a lobbyist, you couldn't be both. He seemed to be anticipating a sort of exposure we're seeing through the ICAC. What was driving the Prime Minister to make those remarks?
There was a huge sigh of relief when Tony Abbott, at his first cabinet meeting, said that people can be lobbyists, that's fine, but if they're going to be a lobbyist, they can't be on the state executive of the party or the federal executive of the party, not just the Liberal Party, for all political parties. And we were delighted to hear that. Now, it did cover what we call registered lobbyists. Okay, now there is another type of lobbyist which is basically the same thing, except that a registered lobbyist is a gun for hire who works for several clients. An in-house lobbyist is someone that just works for one institution, but their primary job is to influence the government. Now, we believe that the ban on serving on the state executive should include those lobbyists as well. At the moment, the party president of New South Wales, his day job is the CEO of the Online Gambling Association. Now, I'm not a wowser. I'm not against online gambling, but no, it's not illegal. But I mean, I think it's murky.
It's not a good look for them.
It's not a good look.
We'll get to reform later, but you sent out an email to your subscriber base on Wednesday evening complaining the party had been misleading about a survey testing the membership on party reform, plebiscites in particular. What are you saying?
I believe that the conduct of this survey is going to be a major turning point in the history of this party. About 3 or 4 years ago, the Democratic Reform Movement began, when we started communicating to the average party member that the party doesn't have to be this way, that all the members can have a say on who our candidates are going to be, who our party presidents are going to be, who our senators are going to be. Now, that has become this grassroots movement that has grown and grown and grown. So in response to that, the state executive, who are very much against the democratic reform, have conducted a survey because of all the pressure. They had to seem to be doing something, so they conducted a survey. Now, the survey result, there were a number of issues I had with that survey, but on balance I was quite happy with it. I mean, there was too many questions and there was other issues, but on balance I was happy there was a survey being done. Now, the survey results got announced a week ago, and the state executive seemed to be so delighted to say that there wasn't a majority in favour of plebiscites. Well, I went into the head office this week and spent a couple of hours there researching the raw data, and I came away with some very interesting conclusions. It's difficult to explain, but this is the truth. There is a 99.9% chance that there was an effort on a mass scale to collect blank surveys from party members. Party members who are what I call phantom members. They're not even really interested in the Liberal Party. They've been signed up to help the factions, and they've handed over their blank surveys. This is a practice that's been happening in the Liberal Party for at least 10 or 20 years, what we call blank ballot collection. So when there's an election for president, people who are up-and-comers within the faction, often sort of people in their 20s and 30s, who are up-and-comers and who are wanting to earn their stripes, they drive around New South Wales, They knock on people's doors and they say, please hand over your ballot paper. And this is how the factions maintain control. And it's disgusting. Now, what's happened with the survey is they've just done the same thing. It's been documented in the papers about this blank ballot collection. They've done the same thing with this survey. And in the email I sent out, which was a lengthy email, but nobody has refuted it because it's irrefutable, they have gone round and collected a large number of blank surveys. They have filled them in to say, we don't want democratic reform, we don't want democratic reform. Now, despite that there was this machine in place to get all those surveys to say we don't want democratic reform, and the people who supported the democratic reform movement, we're completely disorganised. We don't have a machine. We still got a majority. So I found the results of the survey, what the state executive said about them was discouraging, but the truth is when the raw data is analysed, it was extremely encouraging because without a machine, a majority clearly want democratic reform.
We knew in the Labor Party that Eddie Obeid held power greater than the Premier within the Parliamentary Labor Party. Who holds power within the Liberal Party? Is it Photius now that there's been this coalition of factional interests?
Well, look, I would say I saw your report a couple of years ago about the power of Eddie Obeid. Now, I don't think that would be accurate to say that there is an equivalent of Eddie Obeid in the New South Wales Liberal Party. There are people who have a lot of power in a similar way that he does, but Eddie, yes, could roll premiers. He did it 2 or 3 times. I don't think there's anybody in the party who could roll Premier O'Farrell, or certainly not Tony Abbott.
Well, tell us about Photius then, because he's the star witness at the ICAC today, and it seems to be what Tony Abbott was saying, that and Michael Photius resigned from the state executive, that there's been an aggregation of power to him.
Well, look, I don't want to dwell on personalities, but I will say this. I want Michael Photius to have just as much say in the party as the average branch member at Parramatta or at Hornsby or at Tamworth. I want everybody to have one vote for the party president, for their local state and federal members, for the senators and for their upper house. We will have a great party. There will be a much better culture, and if everybody's treated equally, we'll probably have a lot more members.
Mr Ruddick, we're now expecting the ICAC later this year to find that the Liberal Party has been vulnerable to influence peddlers through various operatives, slush fund donations to the party and to selected candidates in return for favours. Isn't the voting public entitled to feel betrayed by the Liberal Party in government?
Okay, the Liberal Party has been in the headlines in the last few weeks, and to some extent rightly so. But I mean, let's remember this whole Australian Water Holdings thing was principally an Eddie Obeid. It started in genesis with Eddie Obeid. Now, other people got brought into it. There are a lot of courageous people in the Labor Party who are trying to democratically reform the Labor Party, and I salute them. Now, across Australia, but there really hasn't been any significant reform. Just in the last couple of weeks, there's been important discussions about breaking the nexus between the Labor Party and the trade union movement, which of course would be the best thing that could happen to the Labor Party. They could become like the US Democratic Party. The unions support them, but they don't control them. Now, outside of
public confidence in the Liberal Party.
Okay, outside of New South Wales, almost every other division of the Liberal Party and the LNP in Queensland has largely democratised, and it's enormously improved the culture of those parties.
Okay. What are you seeking in reform of the New South Wales Liberal Party?
Okay. Our political party constitution is 234 pages long. There's no point amending it. We need to get that 234-page document and we need to shred it. We need to start afresh with a whole new document. A political party's constitution should be about 50 to 60 pages. We need to start from scratch and we need to make it we need to replace the current delegate-based system. So everyone in the party just votes for delegate, and delegates vote for delegate, and delegates vote for delegates, then you end up with 3 or 4 people running the party. We need to replace the delegate system with a democratic system. So everyone's treated equally, everyone gets a vote. People join a political party because they want to have a say in politics.
And so plebiscites is one of the key planks in your reform. I noticed you've got John Howard looking at, as an elder statesman, to look at the reform of the party.
Well, John Howard, in many ways, kicked off this debate. He wrote in Lazarus Rising, which was released in late 2010, on the second last page, so we think it's quite a significant issue for him. He said in no uncertain terms that the Liberal Party urgently needs to embrace plebiscites, which means getting rid of the factions. He says the factions are producing people who've had no experience in the real world and they're becoming our lawmakers. And I would add, it's producing people who've got no courage. It's people who get rewarded by the factions and people who bow down and kiss their feet. Well, we want people who can stand on their own feet. John Howard kicked it off, and just last November, the party membership was delighted to hear the Prime Minister and the Premier put John Howard in charge of a very small committee of 4 people to bring about reform to the candidate selection process.
With what's been exposed at ICAC so far and your campaign for reform of the New South Wales Liberal Party, you have been calling for federal intervention in this party.
Well, to get constitutional reform through the Liberal Party, we need to get 60% support at State Council. Now, what's State Council? There's 11,000 members of the party in New South Wales. Only 600 of them are on State Council, and it's a gerrymander on State Council. A lot of people are appointed there who just by the factions. If the factions don't think they've got they only need 40% to really control it. If they don't think they've got enough numbers, they just create new branches to give them more delegates to State Council. Now, I fear that even with the Prime Minister and the Premier and John Howard and the media and the public in support of democratic reform and the historical precedents and the international precedents, I fear that we still won't get the 60% required.
You don't have the numbers, therefore you need federal intervention.
Well, if we don't, we cannot let this intolerable situation continue. So we will absolutely call for federal intervention from the federal executive of the Liberal Party.
You face disciplinary action for doing this interview, don't you?
Well, I would be very surprised, but a lot of things surprise me in the Liberal Party, if there should be disciplinary action this week for what I've exposed as a dreadfully corrupted survey. That's where the disciplinary action should happen. It's not going to be a very good look if the party wants to move against me for A, exposing this terribly corrupted survey, and secondly, someone who's trying to bring in a democratic reform, if they move against me, when there's a lot of other people out there where the disciplinary action should be taken against.
John Ruddick, we'll see what happens to you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for talking with us.
Thank you.